Does the deafening rancor of the political process ever make it hard for you to actually discern what the issues might be? Well, there is one system of free elections that does remove partisanship from the process. Baha'i elections, up next on The Light of Unity. Welcome to The Light of Unity. I'm Nwandi Lawson. You know, in my career as a journalist, I've spent a great many years covering politics. And one thing that I can generally count on, with only limited exception, is that the people that participate in elections usually rises to about 50% during presidential years and then falls just under 40% when there are midterm elections. When I go out and I interview people and ask them why they are not participating in the democratic process here in the United States, they often express disillusionment. They say it's actually big money and ties to business and so forth that actually determines the outcome of the election and not the vote of the individual. Well, I wanted to get in depth with the Baha'i electoral system because it does eliminate politics from the process. And to do that, I have joining me in studio today Lee Shannon. He lives in the Gwinnett community, the Baha'i community of North Gwinnett. And we also have Richard Pellegrino joining us here as well, lives in the South Cobb community here in Metro Atlanta. So welcome to both of you. Want to get into this a little bit here on The Light of Unity, just by perhaps first just introducing our viewers to why there is even a Baha'i electoral process. What's behind some of this, Lee?
Well, in Nwandi, we'd like to frame this discussion in the context that we as Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah, which is an Arabic term that means the glory of God, and defines the station of Baha'u'llah, is the latest of God's messengers to mankind. In a succession of messengers that include Abraham, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah for this day. And in his, the vast scope of his revelation, he made a prophetic statement, a profound prophetic statement in the late 19th century, where he said, "From two ranks of men power hath been seized, kings and ecclesiastics." And if we review the history of the world just in the last 150 years, at the time he made this statement, 80% of the earth was ruled either by a monarch, a dictator, an emperor, and so the power was concentrated in the hands of a very few individuals. My take or my interpretation of this quote is that Baha'u'llah has stated that by divine decree that the process has been started where power would be transferred from just a few individuals to the people in general. And in the scope of his revelation, he revealed this verse also. He said, "The world's equilibrium hath been upset through the influence of this most great new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mankind has never witnessed."
So now, Richard, if we look at what he's saying about the complete change here in the system of governance, taking it out of the hands of clergy and out of the hands of monarchs, what does that look like, though, in reality in the modern Baha'i world?
Sure. Well, again, taking it from the big macrocosm, the covenant that Lee talked about, God, if you're a believer in God or the creator of the universe, it's all similar concepts, there's been a promise that we would never be left alone, and that we would be given the way to organize our life so that we were able to live in unity and love one another and practice spiritual principles. So how that translates now into the practical today is we've been given in the Baha'i scriptures, which number over 100 volumes, because so much knowledge has been revealed in this day, because we're coming into the time of the maturity of mankind through its adolescence, and that's the birth pangs of a new world order we're experiencing. So now we've been given a system, a new world order, You've probably heard that term before that's been borrowed by politicians for good or worse. But in a positive sense, an order that is, as Lee said, that is run really from the bottom up by the grassroots, by the people. And how that's organized is in every Baha'i community, we elect, we have no clergy, because again, this is a day of the maturity of mankind. In the past, there was a role for clergy, and the clergy do wonderful work today as well in terms of ministering to the community. But no longer do we need to follow someone else. We have minds and hearts of our own to be able to discern truth. But we need an organization. So we elect in every local community, like in Lee's community, my community, a body called the Local Spiritual Assembly, 9 people who serve, who are true public servants. They serve, it's a voluntary position, they don't get rewarded, they have no individual power, they have no material reward, it's a spiritual reward. And the same process in the national community, 9 people who are elected to serve that country. And then in the world, we have 9 people elected that sit on Mount Carmel in Haifa, Israel, and that's called the Universal House of Justice. So it's a few of the details, there's a lot more.
So you've been talking about the administrative order and you know, the local as well as the national, the international bodies that are governing the Baha'i communities. I'm just wondering, who are the candidates then? We mentioned in the intro that we don't have a political campaigning system. So who's running for these offices?
Actually, everybody's a candidate. Every Baha'i in every community and globally who is over 21 years of age is eligible to vote and eligible to serve should they be elected to an institution. As Rich mentioned, there's no campaigning. I can't run for the local spiritual assembly in my community, and neither can Rich run in his. We may be elected, and then we would serve, but there's no actual campaigning. So you're not beholden to anybody if you happen to serve on that institution. And it's like he said, there's no compensation. It is a spiritual reward, and it's a difficult and dedicated path of service.
That's interesting. Now, how can the Baha'is make sure then that the best qualified people are serving, that the jobs are getting done?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, again, there's 2 dimensions we're talking about. Of course, we're on the Interfaith Bureau. It's the spiritual and the human or practical. And this whole process is a spiritual process. So we rely on prayer, meditation, and on the practical side to get to know each person in the community and the qualities of selfless service and leadership that they have. That's the purpose, really, in any democracy, not just in the Baha'i system. Each individual is supposed to do that and take it into their own hands, their head and heart, and investigate. And in the Baha'i system, that's the only way we can, because there are no nominations, there's no campaigning. So it's up to each individual to discern who would be good to serve for that year. And it's not dependent on education or how much money you have or your race or whatever. As a matter of fact, to preserve the minorities in a community, the rights of the minority, and to make sure that there's unity and diversity on our bodies, because that's a basic Baha'i principle. If in an election there's a tie between the minority and a majority person, it goes to the minority. So that ensures a diversity on that body.
Can I add something to that? And Wendy, Rich mentioned the prayerful attitude that when Baha'is vote is so contrasted to political elections in the temporal realm that it's amazing. And the people that get elected, whether it's locally, nationally, or internationally to the Universal House of Justice, and those elections occur every 5 years, it's amazing to know the humility that these people exude at being chosen by their community to serve.
So take us inside one of these elections. I mean, is there a polling place, ballots, and how, if you're able to choose from every Baha'i who's over 21 in any jurisdiction, How are the ballot? How's the balloting actually done?
I was the chief teller in our community just a couple of years ago, so I could give you the inside process.
Take us inside.
We didn't make any money at that.
No. In fact,
Nobody bribed you.
just we have a new ballot system now, but to expedite the counting process. But after coming together at the local level, an annual meeting is held. And in that, all the changes in the community, were there births or did anybody pass away, marriages, the financial status of the community, the attendance of the previous year of all 9 members is mentioned. And then after that prayer and reflection is the next ballot cast. And then after the ballots are cast, in secret, in thoughtfulness, and in prayer, they're turned in. Or if you can't make it to the election, you can mail in a ballot just like in a normal election. And then they're tallied up, and then the top 9 vote getters are announced.
That's fascinating.
Can I share some of the distinctive nature of this system? Please. As Lee read earlier, this is a wondrous new system, the likes of which has never been seen before. And some of what we've described, some people could say, well, I have that in my church, the Board of Deacons, and so forth. The difference is, and I'm not saying there's anything bad about it in any other faith or how it's organized, this is just the new covenant. Christ said, there's many things I have to tell you, but you couldn't bear them now, so this is what we can bear now. This system is worldwide, in every village on earth. We have more representation, more bodies than the United Nations has, representing on every village on earth. Okay, number one. Number two, this body is not just for the local assembly and the national assembly, it's not just for the Baha'is. The Baha'is serve on it and serve the community, but they're called trustees of the merciful. Therefore, the greater community, the whole community, to serve the whole community in its social and economic and spiritual development. Okay? And they're destined, Baha'u'llah said, to become houses of justice. That will be their title in the future. Just like the Universal House of Justice, we'll have local houses of justice and national houses of justice as they evolve. And then the other distinction, and then I'll be quiet for a moment, is the process within the assembly, which is called consultation. And it may sound different. People may not be familiar with that word, but I'm sure they're familiar with conflict resolution, mediation. All of those things came from the principle of consultation that Baha'u'llah brought. And we're practicing them in various aspects of the society now. This is the process within.
So talk a little bit more about that, if you would, Lee, then, because consultation, we know this word, it kind of means like discussion, but are we simply saying that these groups come together and they discuss matters?
Well, not only the business of the community, personal issues are brought to the assemblies, and everything that is, all the consultation, any of the matters of the business of the community that happens in the chambers is completely secret. It's not, none of the consultation is shared. I mean, there may be friction and conflict. I've served on 3 spiritual assemblies in my years of being Baha'i, and at times there are some heated discussions. But once a matter or a course of action has been decided upon, whether it be just by majority or unanimously, then some action is taken. But it's in strict confidence. So if Mr. Smith brings his really a pressing problem to the assembly that he would want to be public knowledge, none of the assembly members are going to mention that or even discuss it outside of chambers among themselves. But it's interesting what Rich said is that since Baha'u'llah made that statement just barely 125 years ago, that the equilibrium of the world has been set up by the revelation of this most great new world order, and that's where the term originated, is that spiritual assemblies have now been established in over 15,000 localities around the globe, over 180 national spiritual assemblies, and the first Universal House of Justice was elected in 1963, just 1 century 1 century after Baha'u'llah made his public declaration of what his station was, as the manifestation of God, or the voice of God to man for this day. And that's never occurred, that covenant that Rich talked about has never solidified ever, and never occurred so rapidly in religious history.
I guess this stage that we're in the world, a lot of things are moving very quickly. You wanted to add something there, Rich?
Yeah, another thing about consultation is that it's, again, spiritual, prayerful, okay? If Lee and I are both pretty strong personalities, we contribute our idea to the mix if we're consulting together. Once it goes out on that table, it's not his or my idea. So whether it's accepted or rejected, we cannot take credit or blame, okay? So that's, and if we do get heated, right, which is likely to happen between an Irishman and an Italian, then the chairman of the assembly says, let's stop and pray, okay, and come back to an even keel. Because what we realize in the Baha'i faith and in interaction with every human being, no one has a corner on the truth. We all have a piece of the truth, right? And when we contribute it together, then from the spark of differing opinions comes the shining spark of truth, okay, from the clash of differing opinions, I'm sorry, okay, but not the clash of people. So we separate the opinions from the people.
Well, in two, if I may, excuse me, what Rich mentioned about consultation, and sometimes it is heated in assembly chambers, but can you imagine that if the electorate for our society went into their councils, their chambers, and actually said prayers before they began, that maybe some action, more action would be evident in today's society. And that's always the way the spiritually elected assemblies in the Baha'i faith start, is with prayer, and they end with prayer. And what happens in between those prayers, there may be some more prayer in between. But what happens in those chambers stays in those chambers.
You know, on a previous episode of The Light of Unity, we had married couples come in, and they were talking about consultation as something that they used within their homes. I'm wondering, one of the things that they brought up was that after the decision was made, then everyone just would be willing to joyfully execute that decision. Is this the same process that we're talking about with administrative elected bodies?
Yes, we're asked by Baha'u'llah again to obey the decision of the assembly, okay? And whether we feel it's right or wrong, which again takes a spiritual process, a detachment, okay? But that's the only way that everyone can learn. We're in a culture of learning, okay? We're in a culture of unity, just like Lee was saying. If our secular institutions had that concept, service, learning, unity, nobody knows the truth, then we could progress together as one. So yes, we obey the decision whether we agree with it or not, and then the assembly can see, well, maybe the decision was right or it wasn't wrong. But if you and I are fighting, nobody can tell who was right and who was wrong.
So what is done when the decision is wrong?
Well, should be unified obedience to whatever the decision is, because if there is unified obedience to a decision, and it was the wrong decision, it'll become obvious a lot quicker than if there's all this conflict. And one thing about that's unique to Baha'i administration that is, in my opinion, desperately missing in the government that we see in our community today, is that government and religion have been separated in this country, which is good. Especially in the light of the conflict between religions today. But when you remove spirituality from governance, then you see the results of what we see today.
That's a good discussion.
In the Baha'i administrative order, it always operates by spiritual principle.
And it sounds like then unity is the core principle there too, whether or
Right.
not the decision is right or wrong.
And also, that's the ultimate goal. The Baha'i writings say that, you know, without unity, there can be no progress. Okay, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless its unity is firmly established. Okay, so unity comes first. But there's a practical answer too to what happens if you don't agree and we're not getting anywhere. There is a process of appeal to the National Assembly and to the International House of Justice, realizing that we're all human, okay? And the local and national assemblies are not infallible. They're made up of humans. Yes, 9 people, 9 heads are better than one, you know, consulting in a spirit of unity. But mistakes can be made. So there are practical aspects to this whole process.
And also, you have to remember that the Baha'i administrative order is also evolving. This is a new religion. As far as religions, world religions that come from divine revelation, the one before this one was from Muhammad, and that was in the year 632 A.D. So 1,500 years or so, or almost 1,500 years. So for late in its just second century of existence, this is still an evolutionary process. Now, not the mechanics of it, but the results. And in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I mean, the mankind needs a new model for governments. I mean, we're at a point, Rich mentioned unity. I mean, Baha'u'llah said, so bright is the light of unity that it will illuminate the whole earth. And what we see today in our society is conflict, strife, contention. You know, you could watch the news, so we need a new spiritual model for governments, for governance of our world.
So if Baha'is have this unique system of governing and a unique system of elections, does this remove them then from the political process of the country in which they may live, in this case the United States, or is there any way that they can participate in that kind of social discourse?
Well, there's many ways. Number one, our system has been studied by various administrations of the U.S. government because they felt there was elements of our system that are more democratic. Also, the Club of Rome, which is made up of Nobel Peace Prize winners, have studied our system and have favorably commented that this could be the model for the future, the historian Toynbee and so forth. So the world is aware and is learning more about it. Then individual Baha'is, we vote in the elections of our country, except we don't take sides. We're not partisan. We don't join this party or that party. We're the true independents, not the independent party, okay? That everybody's trying to reach, those independents in the middle that make up our mind based on the candidate. And of course, every Baha'i in their own sphere reaches out to people around them, whether it's human rights, civil rights. I mean, if you believe in unity, and you don't want to see someone suffering, your neighbor suffering, then you're going to be involved in your own way, shape, or form. The difference is we're nonpartisan. Just like nonprofit organizations, by law, they're not allowed to be partisan because they're trying to help the whole community. And the Baha'is as individuals and as an organization is nonpartisan.
Well, Rich is well known in the Atlanta area as being a social activist for human rights. I mean, and I say that, you know, in a sense of admiration for him. But as individuals, we are encouraged as Baha'is to do whatever we can to support our communities and to work with our elected officials. And just an example, 2 years ago, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States asked all the local spiritual assemblies, as well as the individual Baha'is, to contact their elected representatives on behalf of 8 Baha'is who were unjustly imprisoned in the country of Iran. And we've been asked to encourage them to support resolutions both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. So we are involved in our community, but we're just not left and we're just not right. We're, like Rich said, the true independents. And then on a global level, the Baha'i faith is the only divinely revealed religion that has a permanent affiliation, a permanent office, and a non-governmental office at the United Nations. In fact, the Baha'is between 1990 and 1996 spearheaded or were an integral part of the leadership in conferences that dealt with the environment, with the education of children, with the station of women, to name three of them. And we were encouraged because those are all Baha'i principles.
Wow. So that's on a very large scale, national, international scale. But, you know, Richard, you mentioned that each individual Baha'i may in their own community see suffering and things that they can reach out to. So kind of what kind of social activism do you see on the individual or the more local level?
Well, now that the Baha'i world infrastructure is developed, these assemblies and national assemblies are elected, we've been asked now to focus on neighborhoods, on developing neighborhoods. And you want to talk about decentralized government? That's the most decentralized you can get. Neighborhood by neighborhood, developing neighborhoods. And the people in a neighborhood or village or town, they know what their issues are and what their problems are. They know each other, okay? And a lot of times they have developed their own spiritual receptivity and dependence on God. Okay, so now it's the coming together within neighborhoods. It's just like family. A family is a nucleus of society. Then you have the neighborhood, the village, the town, the city, and the nation. So now we're focusing on, do children's classes. We educate children in a neighborhood about all religions, not just the Baha'i, but the unity of the oneness of mankind, the oneness of religion. We do junior youth programs because that's the up-and-coming teenagers and leaders of the society. We have devotional gatherings, and you don't have to be a Baha'i. You know, it's not whether you're a card-carrying Baha'i or not. These are spiritual principles that have been given to the world by Baha'u'llah. And so these are some of the, and then we have a whole curriculum of study circles, like a community college where we educate ourselves in various degrees of spiritual knowledge and practical knowledge too. That's open to the community. So we're doing this on a village by village basis, administered by those local assemblies.
Really, especially what Rich mentioned of what the Baha'is at the local level are doing as far as children and youth and junior youth is concerned. Is so much needed today. And as we go into neighborhoods, it's not about dogma or doctrine. We don't have any dogma or doctrine. But every child, it's beneficial for every child to learn virtues for his or her own well-being and for the good of the world. Yeah. And there's a tremendously unified effort by the Baha'is here in this country, worldwide really, to reach out to kids and to youth.
Well, Liddy and Richard, I want to thank you all so much for helping us to understand more about the Baha'i electoral process and certainly taking it down to that neighborhood level. Thank you so much. If you'd like to learn more about the Baha'i faith, certainly the electoral process or any other aspect of this faith, please feel free to call 1-800-22-UNITE or log on to www.baha'i.us. I'm Nwandi Lawson, reminding you again that the central principle of the Baha'i faith is that so powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. We'll see you next time for another edition of The Light of Unity.